Are you going through dark night of the soul through the masculine, or are you going through dark night of the soul through the feminine? Stay tuned, because in this video, we're going to talk about the difference between a masculine dark night of the soul and a feminine dark night of the soul. Hey guys, and welcome to Spiritual Awakening Sundays. And in today's video, we're going to be talking about the two different types of dark night of the soul. If you guys are new, hi, hello, welcome. My name is Astaria, and here on Spiritual Awakening Sundays, we talk about all the tools you need to help guide you on your spiritual awakening journey. One of the things we've been talking about is dark night of the soul. And if you missed the video on what is dark night of the soul, I'll try to link it up here. I have a couple of videos out on dark night of the soul, practices to get through it, how to pull yourself out of it. So you might want to check those out as well. Today, we're going to be talking about the two different types of dark night of the soul. And I'm going to share my personal experiences of them so you can kind of see the difference and understand how they do relate, right? And your dark night of the soul might pan out a little bit different, but I'm just going to share my experience so you can see how the masculine went through it and how the feminine went through it. So my first dark night of the soul happened shortly after my awakening. And this was my feminine dark night of the soul, okay? So what happened was I went through my Kundalini awakening in January 2019 and early March, it was like the first few days. This one was rather quick, by the way, and it's very interesting when you see how the masculine dark night of the soul went out. This went on for a long time, but early March so this was 2019. It ended by the end of March, so it was like less than 30 days. It was only about 3 weeks. There was like a super moon and the spring equinox, and they all aligned, and then all of a sudden I was like thrown out of dark night of the soul. So it was a rather quick one. But what happened was, so when you go through a Kundalini awakening, I went through a spontaneous one. And so instantaneously, my vibration shifted. I always talk about like somebody flipped on a light and then my whole world changed. And what happened really is my perception changed, my perception and perspective changed. And so all of a sudden, I've been in this 3D matrix my whole life. At that point, I was 35 years old. It's been 35 years like blind in the matrix. And I had no idea there was this whole spiritual world out there. And so what happens to your ego when you wake up and you go through the fourth density ascension, okay? Here I am on the matrix level, 3D, and then I wake up here, and I pulled my ego up here to the fourth density. But my ego's like, whoa, what is this, right? And so my ego freaked out, and it threw me into a dark night of the soul, because what happened was your Kundalini energy, all that feminine energy rose, right? It awoke it. And so it was blasted up with so much heart center energy, so much divine feminine, so much ecstasy, so much bliss, so much. I'd never felt love like that before, unconditional love. And that aligned me with my soul's vibration. Like the Kundalini brought in all that feminine, it brought in all the spiritual love and like soul energy, which is great. But here's my spiritual soul energy, right? Rising up to the fourth density. My ego wants to stay down here in the third density. So what happens? It was forced up here. Well, it freaked out, right? My ego had to go through all these experiences. And for me, like I grew up in the Catholic Church. And so I always thought God was a man in the clouds. And my ego was like, what? Reincarnation is real. Like God is not a man in the clouds. And you learn all these spiritual truths and you wake up and you start seeing energies or auras. At least I didn't, like things shifted. And so my ego is like, what is this new world? Like I'm freaking out. Like, what do you mean? 35 years of beliefs are wrong. Everything I ever knew is wrong. My ego like was shattered, right? Because it didn't know how to deal with all this feminine energy. It didn't know how to deal with my soul's energy. It didn't know how to deal with my truth. And so it like went in and it was like tried to restrict me back to the third density. But hey, that Kundalini energy is a little strong, all right? It's going to win. And so there was about 3 weeks that it was dark. I had no idea about the spiritual world at this time. Like I said, I was only about maybe 6 weeks into my awakening, and all this was new to me. I had Kundalini before my awakening. I was like, what is this, right? I didn't even know dark night of the soul at the time. And so what happened was, it was really strong at night to the point where I was like, I don't want to live at night. But during the day, it wasn't as intense. So the Kundalini energy is really active after like 7 p.m. and extremely active after 10 p.m. all the way to 5 a.m. So I feel that like around those times were the worst for me, to the point I was just like, I don't want to be here. I mean, I remember cussing out my spirit guides. Like, why did this happen? Blaming everything that was happening to me on my spiritual team. Like, I was like, my ego was shattering away, and it was such a fear energy. Like, I literally like couldn't stand, like a second felt like an eternity. It was horrible. At this time, I was still on some prescription meds, and so I was like taking them to go to sleep, like an extra one, because it was so much. I'm like, I can't deal with this. And I was just like crying and like screaming at God, my guides, everything. Like, why did you do this to me? There was like 3 weeks of I just couldn't understand. And I thought it was never going to end, right? And then it did. It did. It just, bam, was done. I still could be, it was very interesting how my mind played out because for the day I still had an okay handle on stuff. I was going through physical purging, physical ascension symptoms, and I was sick for like 7 days. There was a lot of purging and a lot of releasing, but I was still listening to different frequencies and trying meditations. And so I still had some spiritual practices, but there was a lot of resistance. And I wasn't in that happy, blissful, ecstasy place I was in January and February. It was just gone. I was very disconnected. I kept saying I was going through a spiritual crisis and I just wasn't happy. But I was still kind of, those spiritual practices what kind of helped pull me through it. And so I was still doing them. And what happened was, I remember listening to some frequencies one night and I woke up and it felt like it completely quantum shifted. And I woke up like, oh my God, I'm in another timeline, another dimension. I'm like a million pounds energetically gone. And it was just light and it shed away. But, you know, I look back and I could see stuff that was going on at that time. And I was like, wow, the supermoon, the spring equinox, all that stuff. And I could see how me listening to the frequencies and all the stuff I was still doing, like, helped. And that Kundalini energy is so strong that eventually my ego was, like, forced to rise up and deal with these new vibrations, right? It's like the awakening happened. My ego was like, hell no, don't pull me. But I pulled me. And so the ego, like, retreated back. But no, this energy was so strong, that soul, that Kundalini, that eventually, like, worked its way back up. And then they merged and integrated together. So when I got to the other side, like, I thought I was on this ecstasy and bliss planet in January and February. When the beginning of April came, oh my Moses, like, I don't even, it was like, what? The world can feel like this? I shed so much of my ego. All those layers were like gone. I didn't know life could be this amazing. And it was freaking the best it had ever been in January and February. But it was like a whole other, like, I was just in love with everything and everyone. And God, my twin flame was around. So things were like really intense at that time. But it was, wow, like you catapult to the other side. It was too much feminine energy, right? And so the feminine, because there was so much, this is what I call the feminine dark night of the soul, because I was so prominent in my feminine energy, my masculine, or even my ego. My ego didn't know how to do it. It was like really an ego death. That's the thing. It was so strong. The feminine still rose. And so too much feminine for me ended up shattering my ego, and it put me into a 3-week dark night of the soul. And guys, I just realized we're about 8 minutes into the video, and I like to keep my videos like as close to the 5-minute mark as possible, just because when I first started going through my awakening, I wanted to learn so much. Trying to watch all these long videos, I was like, no, I want quick to the point. So that's why I try to keep them at that mark. So I think we're going to do this a part 2, and I'm going to do a part 2 on what happens when the masculine goes through dark night of the soul. So stay tuned for that. But yeah, that's my story with the feminine dark night of the soul, and how I got through it with spiritual practices and the frequencies, and how the ego shattered away, but then I rose from the ashes afterwards. So thank you guys so much for watching. And if you got anything out of this video, do me a favor and that thumbs up button this way I know you've got something that resonated. You guys haven't already subscribed to my channel, make sure you hit the subscribe button. There's a bell too. You want the bell and turn on all notifications. I don't want you guys to miss out on any upcoming messages. That next message just might be that important message that you need to hear.